The State of Rugby in New Zealand, an investigation into the issues facing the sport, a year out from the Rugby World Cup.
I think they have to win the World Cup in their own country in 2011. I hate to think what's going to happen to the national psyche if they don't.
People have talked about the monkey on our back around the World Cup. Well, it's now a full-size gorilla, isn't it? I mean, we've got King Kong on our back. We've just got to find a way of taking the expectation and the pressure to perform well at a World Cup and turn that into a positive and not turn it into an overbearing set of stresses that then make it difficult for our guys to perform. You know, it's easy to say, so I'll say it, you know, World Cup is actually winning 7 tests in a row. And we often win 7 tests in a row. Throughout our history we've done it on a very regular basis. But for some reason we're finding it very difficult to do that in the World Cup environment, and you know, we'll work hard to come up with a way of ensuring the guys are as best prepared as they possibly can be.
Well, I think the players need to be in control of where they're going. I think they need to run themselves, if you know what I mean. Like they're all on individual development programs, all on enhancement programs, but they need to be the driver of those programs. And people like me and Pat Lamb or Todd Blackadder or Ian Foster, we are there to assist in that process. So the more we can get them to drive their development, drive their enhancement, I think the better we're going to be. I think the second thing is that we need to all be on the same page in driving that. So maybe a lesson learned from 2007 was when we took players out of the Super 14, it wasn't the best thing to do. So working very closely with the Super 14 franchises, their management and their player management and their coaches, I think is very critical, and works. A lot of work's been done to try and ensure that we're all on the same page on that. I think there's a greater awareness of player welfare. How much rugby can they play before they're going to fall over and be no good to anybody? Like this year, we've had more injuries than I can remember. And we started the year without McCall, without Carter, without Williams, without Richard Kahui. Conrad Smith didn't play in the first test. Rodney Soala was rested because he was buggered. And you take all those leaders out and you've got a problem. So just making sure that you do your best in your rugby environment, all working together to ensure that Richie's going to be fine for the Rugby World Cup is pretty critical.
Rugby World Cup has tended to become something different here in this part of the world than it is in other places. I think other countries view it as something terribly important in Rugby World Cup year. But outside Rugby World Cup year, they get on with the game that they play on a regular basis. We tend to be all-pervading and focused on Rugby World Cup. And I hope we're not doing that in a way of saying, oh, we can do it, oh, you know, I told you so, oh, we got it right, we just were upset by a referee or something like that.
We will struggle. You know, we will not go rock up to the Westpac Stadium in Wellington and when the opposition kicks the goal, be like what we found in Munster in Dublin when the All Blacks played in Ireland. You could hear a penny drop. They wanted dead silence to allow the kicker to have a crack at goal. We're not like that, mate. We'll boo the living daylights out of anyone apart from our guys. And that's what we're like. And that's the same as in Wales and a little bit in South Africa. We take our rugby pretty damn seriously. It's number one over here, and that's what we're like. There will be no softening. The World Cup, it'll be worse. Every referee's decision that goes against the All Blacks over that 6-week period, he will not leave the country. Immigration will have him held up at the ports and the airports. He won't get out. And that's what we're like.
So I think the vision really has to be here. Host a successful World Cup commercially, showcase New Zealand, a great country, do all that side of it, but just make sure that the All Blacks win so that the World Cup can cease to be an obsession. It can be ticked off because you've won another one and you can probably go another sort of 2 or 3 World Cups before you, if you don't win the next 2 or 3 after that, you'll probably live with that, and you can probably just downscale where the World Cup sits and all your expectations. If it's not won in your own country, God knows what's going to happen.
I think that's part of our development, that we've got to embrace the opportunity rather than be inhibited by it. And, a lot of work's done to try and ensure that happens. You can't guarantee it. But we're very aware. I think if we can really look forward to the tournament and embrace the occasion and look forward to the opportunity, that's the best thing we can do. If we're concerned about it, we're inhibited about it, we're negative about it, that'll be a real downer. So I think it's important that the country and the team embrace the opportunity.
Are we obsessed? Yes. Are we too obsessed? No. Can't be. Come on, it's our national game, There are 21-year-olds alive today who don't know what it's like to live in a New Zealand that has held the World Cup. That is something that has to be righted, and once it will be, everybody will be able to exhale. But it feels like our rugby sphincters have been clenched since 1991, and, they won't relax until the universe is put right. But that's one of the awesome things about following sport, it's part of the journey.
Mate, all you got to do is just go down to a rugby club, go down to a pub, ask how the All Blacks going at the World Cup time, and you'll just get it you'll get a fistful of it. Straight in the old gob, straight in the old earful. We're just no good when it gets to the World Cups, G. Play all the best rugby in between them. And what? How do you argue with that? Because the facts state the same.
It's quite interesting. Somebody mentioned the other day to me that Owen Franks, the young prop who's in the team now, he's the first All Black to have been born after the All Blacks won the World Cup. So he'd be the first of many who will be starting to come into the All Blacks who's got no memory of 1987. He didn't actually live through it. So it'd be quite fascinating to see what happens to the team dynamic when you end up, if you don't win in 2011, you're going to have an awful lot of young men coming into the team who've actually never seen New Zealand win. They weren't alive when New Zealand last won a World Cup. Now that will do, people can dismiss that, but I think that will do something fairly significant to the All Blacks around future World Cups, where you have generation of the whole team of people who have an expectation that the All Blacks go to the World Cup and they bomb out in the quarter-final or they bomb out in the semi-final. Vocational learning is huge. How many kids in New Zealand were inspired by 1987 by seeing David Kirk with the cup, and how many kids were in their back garden straight after that day living the dream, and that's what they wanted to do. You can't underestimate the power of seeing success at the highest level and what that does to children's dreams and aspirations.
I think it's terribly important that we realise that it's not just about the All Blacks and playing in the Rugby World Cup. The fact that it is in New Zealand offers a huge number of opportunities for a far broader number of people, not just the ones that go along to a rugby ground now and again, or often. So there are a whole lot of other areas that overlap into rugby and that can use the rugby vehicle to better themselves commercially or socially or whatever they wish. And so it would be a terrible pity if we lost the opportunity by not doing it well, being good hosts, being also welcoming and have the country in its tip-top form.
The other component is how will the All Blacks go, which in a way is also linked to the success of hosting the tournament. The big worry, of course, is if the All Blacks get dumped out early, that everyone goes, ooh, not interested, don't want to know about the World Cup, All Blacks haven't won it, All Blacks are rubbish, all we care about is the All Blacks, you lot can, we're not interested in hosting you anymore. That's the worry. Ideally what would be great would be, I think it's easier to be a gracious host if your team is actually winning, and that's what they're worried about, is that New Zealanders won't be gracious, they won't be good hosts if they lose that emotional attachment to the tournament by losing the All Blacks out of it.
Are we going to turn up to all those games where we're going to make money? We have to buy 1 million tickets in the pool matches before we get to the playoffs. That's our responsibility, because I've said that's going to cost just a reasonable amount of money. We have to fill the Tauranga, the Rotoruas, the Wanganuis, the Oamaru, all the sort of provincial grounds, the Whangareis, now you're going to tell me that we're going to go and watch Wales play Tonga in Oamaru or maybe in Invercargill, and we're going to fill that ground up 20 to 30, jam-pack it and buy 1 million tickets? Well, I would love to think that we would, and I certainly hope we do. But, there are times when we get a little sort of bit of gut feel on rugby and we can't even fill a stadium when the All Blacks play. There will always be a smattering. We can't even fill a Super 14 final when 2 New Zealand teams are playing in the final. Right. It's our teams. Are we going to rock up to Rotorua International Stadium and watch, whoever, 2 teams that does involve us? Ooh. I'm sure that Martin Snedden has said, well, it's my reputation at stake and I think we're going to. Gee, well, Martin, I'm going to do my thing for you, mate. I'm just going to rock up and buy these tickets because I'm going to have access to them. But, the $1,000 for the final, I could have a party with my whole neighbourhood for that and still have a bit of change left over and watch the game at home. But those seats we've taken up from the overseas guests, which is great. It's just that we as New Zealanders, the so-called $4 million, the 4 million fan base, we are responsible for filling those the grounds up during the pool play. And they're expecting us to fill them. And they're going to price them so we can get to them. Right. I hope we can. But I have a nagging thing at the back of my head. I don't know what it is. Can we fill them? Because that's our responsibility.